Hey freelancers, welcome back to Raising the Bar. So I'm not going to try to act too happy in this episode, even though, as you know, I get super pumped when I talk about freelancing. But the reason is because today's episode isn't that happy. We're going to talk about COVID. Now, the reason I kind of stutter and hesitate is because it's never good. A global catastrophe is never good, right? But we have to come to grips that it has positively impacted our industry. Specifically, it's accelerated what was already happening by about 5 to 10 years. As a recap, my name is Matthew. I'm the author of The Human Cloud and the founder of Venturel. My life's been freelancing, started as a freelancer, led hiring freelance teams, and helped companies spend up to $100 million on us. And I promise you, this episode is going to get you ready today, tomorrow, and for the next 10 years in terms of how we should be thinking and preparing for a life after COVID. What's the impact? Well, there's good news, there's bad news. Good news is that, yes, clients have accelerated their spend on you, specifically because of remote and having to totally transform their business models. Bad news, because there's got to be some bad with some good, right? The bad news is that their expectations now have gone sky high through the roof. So let's look at the good first. In terms of the good, let me give you a scenario of what would usually happen with companies. We'd go to a leadership team, we'd go to a CMO, we'd go to a CEO, a CIO, you name it. And we would say, hey, we have an alternative to staffing an agency or hiring full-time. And this alternative is better, faster, more cost efficient. Not cost efficient in the way of outsourcing your cheap crap, because as we know as freelancers, it's a win-win, but cost efficient in regards to instead of having to have an agency for 6 months, or instead of having to hire full-time, you come in and you work on it exactly when it is needed. It might be a day, it might be a couple weeks, it might be a month. So that was the conditions that were already at play, was that you were better, you were faster, you were more cost efficient. But the two leading barriers in the way were generally the work they thought couldn't be done remote and that it was considered IP, intellectual property. In regards to remote, obviously we know what happened. But the intellectual property thing is actually pretty interesting because when you think about what is IP, technically everything is, right? So if you're a writer doing a press release, that's huge IP. If you're a writer doing something that maybe is ancillary, but you don't know any secrets, okay, maybe not. But most work is considered IP. Most work that you want to be doing too. Now, what COVID did related to that is it shattered business models. And so if you think about a company that's in hotel or travel or you name it, they can't give that excuse because they need a brand new business model and they can't do it with their existing agency and they don't have enough people to do it with their existing full-time employees. So in terms of why spend has significantly accelerated, and I've heard numbers from 3x, 4x, you name it, long story short, things that I didn't expect to happen within 5 to 10 years have now happened during COVID. And the reason is that remote work has made it possible and things that were that IP blocker, it's not realistic when all of a sudden you have to transform your business model. So that's the good news. The bad news though, is that just like there was conditions that things worked at a unit level, meaning the project level, at a program level, meaning hiring you at scale, it's really, really, really hard. So the freelance economy, I mean, we can say it's been around for like 20 years because Elance and Odesk was around 1999. And that means that there's been hundreds, I think it was around 1950 that McKinsey or one of the first agencies started. But so there's been over 70 years that agencies have built really, really strong processes to deliver what I would call a meh client experience, but a consistent client experience. So the rough part for you as a freelancer is that your client is going to be comparing you to an agency. And if you think about what's important about that, there's a couple different factors, but sort of the top three ones. The first is that your client actually doesn't have to do much work when you have an agency, because usually someone's walking the hall that's an account manager and your client just says, hey, I'm having this problem. Or maybe even they go out to dinner, or they go to a baseball game or something. And it's up to the agency to actually scope that massive work. And as you know, sometimes these agencies incur massive costs just to scope the work because they know they're going to win a bigger deal. Now, the sourcing of the work, the managing of the work, the agency handles all of that. So that's the first barrier, is that the agency takes care of most of the crap that the client doesn't want to do. The second thing is that the agency is pretty consistent. And so I call this kind of consistent meh, because you are always going to deliver a better experience, meaning you're going to have a better design, better content. I mean, you're more passionate about it. You probably have more hyper-relevant expertise, but the agency has controls so that things are consistent. Now, here's the really, really big one. In terms of the third thing that the agency does have over you, and just to make sure I kind of summarize, because it's really, really important we nail this. The first one is that they take care of all the stuff. The second thing is that they're very, very consistent. The third thing, though, is that they scale. And so when a company is thinking about how they're going to handle their talent, and the terms are probably going to piss you off, I'm sorry, but they're thinking about it from a procurement lens, meaning how do they get the right resources in the building that don't just handle this one little thing, but can scale across the company. And so when you think about this in regards to you, this means that your work, you can't just do one article or 10 articles. You have to be able to scale up and down from one article to 10 to 100, specifically in line with customer demand. And an agency can do that because they have multiple people on bench. So in terms of this agency experience that's hyper crucial for you, because clients now have heightened expectations post-COVID, the first thing is that you got to take the burden off of them for most of that crap. The second thing, you got to provide consistent experience. The third thing is that you got to be able to scale. Now, the two things that I want you to do right now, the first thing is I want you to standardize and automate your processes. The second thing is I want you to build a dense network. So in terms of standardizing and automating your processes, what I mean by that is I want you to be easy to work with, but not just for a client to know what you do and be able to hire you ASAP, also for yourself. So you should have 3 offerings right now off the bat that you can tell me. A low offering, a medium offering, a high offering. Think about the low as the $200 to $500 one, the medium as the $500 to $5,000, and the high as the $5,000 plus. I need you to be able to tell me right now, what can you give me, by when, and how much does it cost? So that when a client is telling you their pain, you can pick that out right away. Okay, so figure that out. Second thing though, is I need you to then condense that into both your portfolio and a statement of work / proposal document. The reason for your portfolio, so you can show the client. The reason for your statement of work and your proposal document is so that instead of manually doing everything new every single time, you should just be able to go into your G Drive, find the SOW that's from your low, medium, or high, change a little bit of it, but then send it over that same day, ideally within a couple hours. Now, it's the first thing you have to do right now. Second thing though, in order to really hit the scale component, go get a strong network. Specifically, go meet 15 to 50 fellow freelancers, 20 to 30% of them that do the same exact thing that you do, and then the rest doing complementary things. So if you're a writer, go meet a designer, a front-end developer, an SEO expert, and you got this. So to summarize, the impact of COVID, it's been good in terms of client spend has accelerated to levels that I didn't even expect for the next 5 to 10 years. But the bad is that now our baggage is really front and center. Specifically, we need to deliver the agency experience. But you got this, because you're going to standardize, you're going to automate, and you're going to have a strong network.